So, welcome to our Career Accelerator reunion. So, we spent the month of February going through a whole bunch of videos and modern marketing and all the things about talking more marketing within your event role. And today I brought Heather Berggren on. So, Heather was most recently Vice President of Demand Gen. Was that your role?
Cisco demand, all the things demand. Yeah.
So I think when we were wrapping up our last set of accelerator conversations, we were talking about career growth, career trajectory within the corporation of thinking about how to move around within your org as well. And did you spend a little time in field marketing? Do I remember that?
Well, a lot of time actually.
Okay, because there were
Yeah.
some questions at the end of our chat last time about really understanding the differences between like a corporate event role and a field marketing role, and how much more marketing stuff you need to know under field marketing than you need to know under like corporate events. So I wondered if you could share a little bit about that too. But then I know that you have moved around several different types of marketing positions. So could
Yep.
you share your marketing journey with us real quick?
Oh my gosh. I think a lot of people, I have a friend and mentor. She's doing cool AI things right now, and she talks about her career as not a ladder, but more like a jungle gym. And I super love that analogy. It's like, yeah, a little of this, a little of that. Um, I grew up at Dell. I started at Dell in the summer of 2000, just to age myself a hot minute. And I was there for 17 years. I started as a sales coach, and they were building this thing called Dell.com, and they wanted people to be able to configure their own computers. And then suddenly, because I knew how to coach salespeople on configuring computers, I was a web person. And so I found myself, I mean, odd things that happen like that at big companies, but I found myself on the web team on the consumer side of the business. And then it's every 18 to 24 months, I was in a new job, a new problem needed to be solved, a reorg happened because organizations at Dell get married and divorced every 5 minutes. But I think the point was where there was an opportunity, I wanted to take it. And towards the back half, again, 17 years, but the last 7 years, I moved into an organization at a really interesting time in Dell's journey. um, the P&Ls went from a centralized location under the CMO and out into the business units led by the consumer and the, well, call it like the PC side and the server storage backend side. Those two big GMs got to take their P&Ls and figure out what they wanted to do. And suddenly demand generation was a thing, and Dell hadn't done that before. So I
Right.
started my demand gen career literally sitting with salespeople in Round Rock 2, taking breakfast tacos and cookies, and please put your spreadsheets into Salesforce. Like, I need to know who you're talking to. That was the beginning of, but I knew how to talk to salespeople. So I had a really cool opportunity. They were starting to actually spend money on enterprise class programming, and it was like the world opened. What is demand generation? How do you define these things? What does that mean? Events were always a part of that, but I wasn't the person executing the events. So I was hitting up the events team to help me with something, or we were using a vendor to do something with a publisher somewhere else. um, but field marketing at Dell is a little bit different than field marketing everywhere else in the world. um, Field marketing at Dell is really defined as someone who's carried a bag. For those of you who were at Dell, think about the Tony Logans, the Mike Kimballs, even Carrie Palin was a field marketer when I first started working for her. But the idea was that they understood the customer, they understood the message, and they could talk to sellers. So it was a little bit of a trifecta. Everywhere else, field marketing has existed. I have to say, it's my favorite job I've ever done.
Oh,
It is a really interesting part between the customer, the seller, and then the message. And I love that trifecta because you get to really get intimate with the message that you're trying to pass through whichever vehicle, whether it's events or something, digital or whatever. Um, but sellers give you live feedback, and customers, you get to see their reactions, and the combination of those three things is super interesting. Now, why I think that's cool, and Liz, you and I've talked a little bit about that, why I think it's a cool place for people with such rich event experience to look at in field marketing is, and maybe you saw the performance marketing conversation that Liz and I had a while back, but field marketing has a bit of a connotation around events and swag department. and it's like, execute this thing, get me some goodies. Um, it's not where it is anymore. The phrase I like to use is regional marketing, because you are responsible for an area of the world, right? Whatever your patch may be, but you are responsible for owning the relationship with the sellers and connecting the whole depth and breadth of what marketing's doing to them, because they don't. And it's I've literally had this conversation more times than I care to repeat. But I worked at a small born in the cloud SaaS company, founder led. God bless him. He's still the CEO. Um, he came to me. I was in San Francisco. I was in Redwood City actually. Um, and he came to me, and he's a little bit of a presence, right? Walking around this super hip, cool San Francisco office. Um, and I was fairly new. And he came up and sat next to me, and he's like, because I interviewed with him, so I know him well enough to know that this is Aaron Levy. But he's like, Heather, I need to understand. And he's like tapping on my computer. I need to understand why I'm not seeing our ads when I'm
Ooh.
at home watching Netflix with my wife.
Oh, wow.
And I had to look at this man and say, because you are not my ICP.
Yeah.
You are not my intended target. And when I say I've had that conversation multiple times, because sellers do the same thing. What are you spending all this money on? I don't ever see the ads.
Hmm.
Well, you don't have a budget to buy our stuff. So I think the connection there is really the the magic. I just got chills thinking about it. It's so cheesy, guys. I love this freaking job. It's such a great job. Um, but the point is, when you can magically show them the depth and breadth of everything that's happening in the market that our company is paying for, and maybe they don't see it specifically when they're scrolling on their iPad at, while they're watching the I just looked it up. Le Dolce Villa is the greatest new Netflix rom-com. Everybody check it out. Le
Okay.
Dolce Villa. And if you like Scott Foley, you'll love him in older Scott Foley land. He matured very well. Um, my point is to say that if you can equip them with information that's happening and this stuff that you're touching day to day in an events role, who from their patch attended an event? You can even track now who from their patch was scooting around on the website, who attended a webinar. If you're bringing that information to them in a proactive way on a consistent basis, that's super crazy effective for them, because they don't open their computer and go, what has marketing done for me lately? Right? Looking into their account on Salesforce. But if you can show them who was engaged, they have a reason to pick up the phone. They have a reason to invite somebody for lunch. They have a reason to make a meeting happen. And that information is super helpful. That's my why favorite, field/slash regional marketing is my favorite.
So when you grew up in demand gen, it didn't exist. And so you kind of got to define it and learn it along the way, kind of blindfolded and feeling around in the dark with a knife. But now that it exists, if you have someone who is an event background, so they absolutely understand
Mm.
how to go and execute these things, and they're looking to move into field marketing, what would you suggest they start really kind of doubling down on? Who are the informational interviews they need to be having? And if you were looking at a resume that didn't have field marketing on it, what would you want to see in order to hire them for that role?
I like to think in threes. So I would first want to see that they have relationships and are actively talking to salespeople, right? They need to have those sorts of engagement points. And listen, sellers want to talk to people who can help them. So 9 times out of 10, they're always open to talking to you about it. Even if it's on site at an event, or maybe it's can I listen in on a call? They love that stuff. Or nowadays, everything's recorded. Ask them for some recordings, right? Point me to some Gong recordings or whatever AI note taker you have, so I can listen to how the conversation is happening. And if you have that familiarity, it gives you perspective on how customers are actually viewing the sales process. So relationships or conversations with sales. I think there's an operational component to everything we do if you can't track it. I mean, I remember Paul Darcy was our boss back then. He said, if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't count. Right. So if you can't track it, um, it's hard to measure. So if you have operational background and you can go and find where the problem is, or you can go and make sure that all those leads went into the system, and where did they go, how did they matriculate through. um, Sellers love to see stuff like that, right? If you can go and look at an opportunity in Salesforce and see how many touch points they had, whichever attribution software your company is using, that operational education and just knowledge is super, super beneficial. Because if you're able to go back and say half of your opportunities in the pipeline, and any data analyst could go and find this for you, half of your opportunities in your pipeline attended this event.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful information. And so they're like, oh, snap, maybe I can get enough customers so that I can go next time. And they want to have that knowledge. And then so the sales relationships, the operational knowledge. And then third, I would say people who make messages, people who develop the content, people who put their heart and soul into making sure whatever that presentation looked like, they like to be heard. And they love the anecdotal feedback that event marketers can bring to them about this really jazzed them up. This was really exciting. Customers had questions about this. They followed up with the booth with this question. Connectivity with the message makers, I think, is a really important piece, um, of that trifecta again.
What is that
And then
relationship
third,
between a field marketer and the message maker? Is the field marketer isn't the message maker, right? They are the
no,
purveyor of the message, but they kind of subject matter experts as well?
I think a field marketer should know well enough what their priorities are, what the goals of the business are. This quarter we're really focused on security, and these are the things that are happening there. These are the messages we're putting in market. That
Okay.
connectivity with the product marketing team is really, you're the recipient of that information. So product marketing is going to give field marketing the things to go put into the market. Now, if that's, events, or if that's, you know, at Splunk, we did lots of brews and queues events. Users wanted to be in places with each other, right? They
Hmm.
wanted to talk to one another. So that's the community building. It's things like that um, you have to have an SME. You have to have the right people. You have to have the information about the educational credits and all the things that they need, the why they show up. Um, I think that's, if you had just a dip into each of those three areas, I think that's a really strong foundation for putting together a field marketing plan.
I think that's
I
helpful when
think
you're in, a large multi-matrix organization that there tends to be the event ops team and then the so you might not actually have that direct connection. But if you're in one of those smaller or medium business, then you are the one that's doing
it's a
everything.
good
So it
point.
almost feels like you can be a little bit more nimble when you're moving into a field marketing role if you've been in one of those all-encompassing, what is it, the one-man show type of type of roles.
Sure, sure. Yeah, for real.
But if you're in a big, large organization, making sure that you're actively trying to get on some of these projects with some of the other people, I think that's good guidance. I want
I
to
think
switch
field,
gears. Go ahead.
just one note on field marketing. Um, they don't tend to get the biggest budgets. And so understanding where the money is being invested, if we're going hard push on security and we know that 80% of that buyer's journey is online, right? Your digital teams, or whoever is, I mean, I had the good fortune back in the Dell days, field marketing meant I could go and do digital things, but it wasn't web related. My point is just look at where the money is being invested and ensure you understand what's happening there. Like what is the output? They got this many leads. Well, that means that I can go take those digital generated leads and invite them to an event in field programs, right?
Right,
So it's
right.
understanding where that volume is coming from. That's kind of one of the operational points.
Okay,
Switching gears,
that's
sorry.
awesome. So I think that covers a lot of the field marketing stuff that we talked about on our last gathering. Are there any other field marketing questions? I don't know if the folks who asked that question even joined us today, but leave that for a moment. Did anyone have any field marketing questions? Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you about, Heather, is moving up in your own role and going from being an individual contributor managing programs and vendors to becoming that manager for the first time, and how you take that step. And I dug up this old thing from Dell. Now, you guys saw my skills matrix from when I worked at a flat organization, and it was how we could kind of move our own staff up without having them actually get raises and move to another level because the org was too flat for that to even be a possibility. But I came across this thing, share, 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 and share. This was for our event organization that I had worked with HR to create kind of the job family and like the parts and pieces of how someone could move up. And so this was the way we defined how marketing sat in the event organization, the main things that the event teams were accountable for, the grade level, which is Naomi, I think I'm getting feedback from you. So if you want to, did you want to say something or I'm going to remute you? Okay, cool. Um, the grade level, so this is how all companies work. At IBM it was very different than it was at Dell, but these here, I don't even remember what these letters stood for, but they had a pay band associated with them. I don't remember what it was, but let's say that IG is between 50,000 and 60,000, and IH is between 60 and 70, and II is between 70 and 80. So that allowed me to hire somebody at the event advisor level with these skills and know that I was going to bring them in at $50,000, which meant that I didn't need to jump them up to the next full level to give them raises along the way. So I could go, okay, I'm going to give you a cost of living increase of 1,500, but a merit increase of another 2,500, and know that they're still going to stay in that IG level for a year or two. And then we had this kind of manage in place, manage up, or manage out way of managing. So we could either keep people, I guess I still have you spotlighted, but I'll spotlight me too here. So we could keep people managed in place is what I'm talking about here. I'm going to keep them at that same level. I'm going to continue to grow them in their role. And then, but I am going to reward them financially. Manage up is what are those things that they don't have at this level that they need for the IH level that I can make sure either I mentor them into or I get them with the right people to mentor them into so that I move them up. Or if they're not meeting their objectives or goals, or if they want a different role, they want to leave the global event team and they want to become a field marketer, then I could mark them as manage out. It didn't always mean a negative thing. It was just they don't want to move up in this particular role. I can move them over. I don't think, oh yeah, let's see. I don't think this one takes us into the management level. So that's really what I wanted to talk about with you, Heather, is that jump from individual contributor to manager. Because I know my jump was as I was an individual contributor and my manager gave me 3 contractors to start with because she's like, if you screw them up too bad, then it's not our fault, really. We can just cut them. So it was like her way of letting me dip my toe into the water without having to give me management training, but just to see how I would do. And then when I proved that I was okay at that, then we had like the whole official management training process, which doesn't actually teach you how to manage people. It teaches you how to manage the HR around people. Um, right.
Facts.
But in that first jump when you're actually given a team, I think my first team, I went from having those 3 contractors to being handed like this chunk of 10 people. It was an insane jump to go from IC to manager without really a lot of net to catch me. What was your experience?
I had the good fortune that as things were shifting and we were starting to invest more money in this field marketing organization at Dell, it was like, okay, who's gonna step into this role and manage the whole of it. So I had a little bit of a jump like you. It was like take these 5 people and figure it out, divide and conquer. Um, and that's what we ended up doing. But I also find that I work best when I'm a player coach. I want to be in the weeds a little bit to help when I can. And I've done a few things, so I like to think that I can offer something to the process. Um, but my experience was more how to divide the work that we were doing collectively into individuals so that we could measure and grow. What are you most interested in doing? How do we share kind of the load of the heaviest things to lift and then ensure that everybody had their space to grow their own role in and of itself. I think
So
a
did
lot of
you get
times
handed people that had had a previous manager and were now just shifting over to you, or was it like a net new team that got created?
it was a bit of a combination because it was we were going to divide up that team according to sales segment size, and it's like, okay, you guys take the big ones and start digging in deeper instead of the one size fits all. So they were moving SMB over to a separate SMB organization. And this was, okay, now you're a large enterprise and very specifically focused on how
Hmm.
that's going to happen. So they took two people, made each of us the lead of SMB or large enterprise. And then I took the folks that stayed with large enterprise and built that team.
Okay. And did you have to hire new people as well?
Some people didn't want to do that job. So yes, they were like they wanted to go into um, they wanted to go more into the product side of things. I mean, there's so many options at a company the size of Dell, like and Dell welcomed that, right? You want to learn something else? Go do that thing.
Yeah.
So I would say three of the five stayed and really wanted to help build what we were doing. And then two moved into more sales play focused, outbound focused roles where our focus was really inbound. So I brought somebody from public sector over to help join us in the crazy back then. I joke during that time I had more autonomy and more budget than anyone should have ever been allowed to do things, which was a great joy.
Those were the good years.
Oh my God, so good. It was fun. And then double everything with Intel dollars. It was amazing. Um, yeah, it was a kind of build and grow scenario, which is I think frankly how my career has been the jungle gym that it is. It's there was a problem that we needed to go solve, and I stood up to help solve it. Or I was tapped to help solve it. And I think that's where if you are I was listening to a podcast today. There's a lady named Sam McKenna. She has her own sales consultancy. She's the sales part of everything. She has a philosophy around show me you know me. She does a great podcast if you're ever interested. She's a lovely lovely human as well. But I was listening to this podcast and she said the one thing that's um, helped her most in her career is just her curiosity. And I
Hmm.
think that is, I kind of relate that when I'm talking to my kids right home for spring break. I'm like, what are you curious about today? Pull on Ted Lasso every day, right? Curious, not judgmental. And I guess that's Walt Whitman really. Um, Ask questions and get involved. And then it's like, oh, we're gonna grow this thing. Do you want to help? Hell yeah, I do. Um, but building that engagement around curiosity, I think has been a real boon for my career.
What do you think you did to position yourself to be the one that they said, hey, we're going to split this and I want you to be the leader? Were you talking to your manager? Were you talking to mentors? Or were you already taking a leadership role to kind of try before you buy? What made them tap you?
I think I was always very clear about what I wanted, and it was always the next thing,
Okay.
right? It was always the what's next. I've always had my eye on the next thing. Um, I found that about midway through my 17 years at Dell, I felt like my career was driving something and I wasn't driving it, right? It's I'm kind of going where they're asking me to go versus what do you really want to freaking do? And I had to define that for myself and say, these are the three things I want to do. I want to lead a full-on Americas team. Like I want to lead everything about the Americas. I want to own the business. I want to be the throat to choke for sales. And I got to do that at Splunk. Everything that happened in the Americas, which was 80% of their business, was my responsibility. And, you know, I'll never forsake a pandemic for helping me digitally transform that team, but we got some true balance and grew 700% in a time
Wow.
when other people were not growing. So that's, I mean, okay, next, I want global. I want to own all of demand everywhere I go, right? Um, and I think putting the next thing based on where I was, if it's, I was leading enterprise programs at Dell. Okay, cool. I want to lead enterprise program strategy. Like I want to help grow. I want to see what everybody's doing, learn and grow from that, pull it together and understand how we can benefit each other because we were spending huge amounts of money and overlapped tremendously. How do we make this be better? So I always kind of said, this is what I want to do next, and this is the problem I want to solve.
Okay. And you, when you say you said that, did you tell your manager? Did you tell everyone who would listen to you? Like who did you tell to make it happen?
Well, I think my teams, once I started leading teams, I wanted them to come with me. Like, let's do this together. So this is what we're capable of doing. This is how we can do it. And this is what we need to go solve. So we're always working on a problem to solve. But I was very clear with my boss. I was very clear with their boss. Like, this is what I'm going to accomplish this year, and this is what I want to accomplish next year. And, help me understand what I need to do, what I need to work on, what's holding me back. Be very clear and open. I'm an open book, probably not as open book as Nicole's open book, but I'm an open book, right? Um, but I just feel like you have to say what you want.
Your first time being a manager, if you were hiring yourself, what would you have been
Mm.
asking? So I got Naomi's in the
Ooh.
running for a first time manager, and she hasn't officially managed people in the past, but of course is leading without authority, as all event people do. So, what are the questions you would ask, and what would you want to see from her to prove that she could do this?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question.
Because I think for me, I would look at it and I would lean in to the lead without authority part, which is while I didn't have the title or the HR responsibility for these people, it was my job to be their leader, their project manager, set the vision and ensure that all deadlines were met and drive things forward. So I'm excited to actually have that kind of formal management position so that not only do I help them even more in a I guess managerial capacity, but also that allows me to build my career and move up because I would like to be director of a department one day or something kind of telling that story, I think.
Um, I think when you have a body of work that's very defined, to your point around all the things that happen around an event, to even be in the conversation, you have to be badass at that. So I would focus less on how badass I am as this person who can pull off amazing events, and more on what does the experience look like? How would you like to make it better? How would you like to make it easier for your teams to do their jobs, right? How do you lift all boats? And personally, what are you going to do in that role to make that happen? I mean, you can use a specific event as an example. Like, we learned this last year, we're never going to do that again. This is what we're going to do instead. I think in a field marketing capacity, I would always say that the relationship with sales is the most important thing you have. So that's where I would want to dig in really, really specifically and say, you know, how how are you helping sales to make the leads we generate more effective? Right? What feedback are you getting from sales about the things that we're executing? What did they love? What did they hate? Are you open to that conversation? And how are you re rejiggering your plan to be more effective quarter over quarter?
Yeah, there's a great book that I read my first time as a manager called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And it's this guy that worked at
Great
Hallmark.
title.
It was great. He worked at Hallmark and it was like his career and how he viewed leadership. And then he ended up he gave himself a name. It was the creative paradox. He found some empty office and he just took over the office and filled it with like candles and stuff. And people would just come in and pitch him their ideas and he'd tell them whether or not it was good or bad. He just made up his own job. And then he became this super high
That's
level executive at
hilarious.
Hallmark. Pretty hilarious. But in the beginning of the book, they talk a lot about the way that leaders or that managers should be viewed. And instead of this hierarchical, like all this weight pushing down on the little people at the bottom, that we should view it as we leaders are the roots of the tree and our employees are our fruit. And the more we are feeding them and caring for them and making sure that the water is actually able to go up to them, the better fruit they're going to be. And I really, really love that story. And it's kind of how I've always
I
viewed
love that.
leadership since then.
Yeah, I'm here to make my team shine. I'm here to make us all better. What's standing in your way that what can I move for you that will allow you to go faster and better? And I think that the other side though is I have a little folder in my phone of screenshots or things that I've saved, and I would when you need a boost, sometimes I'm looking for my next leadership role, so I feel like I'm talking about myself a lot, and I go to this folder and I talk specifically to myself about the things that people have shared with me about my leadership, and I prefer to be a very open and honest leader. I like to know my people. I like to know your kids' names and your dogs' names. And I want to know what you ate for breakfast. Like, we're going to be close and we're going to have that relationship. Um, and I think that's the thing that stays with me. This particular, her name was Sue. I mean, her name is still Sue, but when I worked with her, she sent me a note when I was actually leaving, and she said, I think about your leadership style as a big hug. Like, I
Aw.
know that you're there. I know that we can fall back or fall into whatever it is you need us to do. It was a very, very sweet thought, but I like to balance what we have to do with how we do it.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I'm sure you remember this, there are a lot of people at Dell who led through the what, right? Dead bodies in their wake, just power through, get to the top. I never, ever wanted to do that. I wanted to be the person that people remembered for helping them, and people who want to work for me again because they know that we're going to do some cool shit together. And that's the power of the team, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think actually making that transition from managing vendors to managing team isn't all that different as long as you've always viewed your vendors in the same way. If you're one of those people that just kind of manage your vendors and they're disposable, if they piss me off, I can just fire them and hire a new agency, then that's not going to work for you because then you're going to have a very not cool leadership style.
Yeah,
But if the vendors are already your partners and you are already setting the vision, ensuring they're executing the vision appropriately, and that you can kind of helm and adjust each other as you go along for the ride, then that's the same leadership style you're going to take into your management
that's
team,
right.
which is set the vision, set the goals. There was another book I read that was the U.S. Army Leadership Manual. I mean, you wouldn't think that's a fun book to read, but it was a really good leadership book, and I think the quote was something like, your people just want to be given direction, given the tools to get it done, and let go to do it. And it's like that's it. That's really what people want.
Um, as an army brat, my father was in the army for 30 years. Yes, please. My husband, um, I went to dinner with my husband and a potential boss who I've worked for before. Um, he was in town a couple weeks ago, and he said, to my husband, he said, what would you suggest I do if Heather works for me? He's like, give her the money and get out of her way.
That's great.
And I was like, babe, come on. Like, we have to set strategy together. But to your point, I think I care about people and humans and relationships. I think I would put connecting is probably one of my superpowers. I think it comes from having those Swiss Army knife jobs where you have to do all the things. Very much
Mhm.
like an event manager has to be responsible for so many things, but all getting all of that done is based in the relationship you build with those people.
Right.
And I want to work with vendors who want to work with me
Right.
and humans who want to work with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
All right, I'm going to unspotlight us and open this up for
love
everybody.
it.
Anybody have
Ooh,
questions, career journey questions, anything you want to bring up?
I haven't looked in the chat. Are we missing anything?
That was one question. Naomi wanted to know the name of the podcast again, the name of the gal.
Yeah, it is the show. Her trademarked sales process is Show Me You Know Me. Her name is Samantha McKenna. She has a great newsletter. Tell her I sent you. Um, she's a lovely lady. Her podcast talks to leaders in all different customer sales roles, all that jazz. Um, but she's also very open and very human. She does a sorry, let me find my calendar. She does a monthly um, call. I love. It's actually this Thursday. It's called Who Runs the World Women's Leadership Group with Sam
Mhm.
Sales. But literally, she answers questions about all things. I find myself very attracted to her leadership style because she's a lot like me. Like, you will know my kids' names, and we'll ask hard questions, and we will figure this out together. I really, really enjoy her whole jam.
That's awesome. Thank you. Ladies, gents, any questions?
I actually have a question for you. First of all, thank you so much. That was really good. So my career has been very, very interesting. I love how you said, just show me the money and get out the way because I use that. I'm going to use that.
Just let me do it.
But the question that I ran up against, really, I will say in the last maybe 6 years in my career. So I was at PlayStation running a team, doing it, shining, the whole thing, Black Girl Magic happening everywhere, doing it. Everybody's happy. VP's happy. Everybody's happy. But what I noticed there is that I would be on a roll and then my manager would change. And then it'd be like, okay, now this new manager has to know, and they love you at first because they're like, you run a tight ship. And they're like, wait a minute, you run it so good, you don't need me. Yeah, I don't need you. Show me the money and get out of my way. Like that's how I feel. So then this last role I had when I moved totally different industries and went over to Thermo Fisher, it was great. I call it the unicorn position. You know how somebody had a great position they want to do, and it's great on paper, and you're great for it, but nobody quite knows how great you are. So then it's like, hey, I can do more. I can do this. I can do that. In a matter of 3 years, I had 5 bosses. And then I got laid off in November. And now I feel like I'm at the point in my career where when I went from PlayStation to Thermo Fisher, I became an individual contributor, even though I was a manager in my previous role, because I was like, sometimes you got to take a step back. Yeah, okay, I don't like that. But I did it. And I feel like I am at this point in my career where I should be a senior manager or a director. I've been doing it. I know what I'm good at what I do. Like I'm amazing. I know that. I don't need them. I know that. My resume, I've got my elevator pitch down. You interview with these companies and like, oh my goodness, yes, you can. But I feel like I can't seem to crack that nut to get to that next level. Like even now I'm contracting as a 1099 and they're doing stuff like, you're so amazing. Can you help us with food and beverage? I'm like, I could do this with my eyes. Like, okay, that's fine. You want to pay me to do this, that's fine. But it's just hard to kind of go from that, like, look, I know what I can do. And it's great because thanks to Liz, because Liz is freaking amazing. I met her many, many years ago, but she had me talk to Taviar. And what he told me, even though he had a role in his team, he said, you are too senior for this role. You need to be back managing people. You should not be applying for jobs that does not give you a team. And that was hard to hear from somebody. I've heard that from several people, like stop applying for jobs if they're not going to give you what you need just to say you have a job. But you know, in this economy, you need a job, you got mortgages and houses. But how do you crack that nut? And it's different now because of course I'm not working, but I got the nice little contracting job and that's fine. I'm working on food and beverage, that's why I went off camera. So that's fine. But how do you do that? Because it's a frustrating.
It's a hard question to answer in this market, right? I think in some places I completely feel the, 5 managers in a matter of if you can count more managers than you can years, that's a on your hand, that's too much.
Right.
But I think what I tend to try to do, especially in volatile and dynamic organizations, right? I worked at two big blue companies, Dell and Cisco, but I worked for smaller companies in between. And I felt like there was always a need to have documented, right? What I'm doing, what the expectations are, and what I need from my manager, because you literally can't tell them, give me the money and get out of my way.
No, you can't.
And I try to tell my husband that. I'm like, babe, I know that's what I want to do, but I can't like
Right.
you need to be needed.
Right.
And I think in those situations, it's really important to clarify what you actually need from your boss. I need you to go move this out of my way. I'm having trouble getting this thing done. And it's consistent, or do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's a consistent problem. Let's not have to do this again. Help me go fix this.
Right.
And then next week, and I've said this before, but I'm a big fan of running documents. I have a running document with my boss. I have a running document with everybody on my team. These are the things we talked about last week. Then I go to the next, right? It's open to my boss and we talk about this is what I need from you. That's the accountability document that I use everywhere I go with every human I work with. These are the 3 things I need from you. And if what you're doing is consistently documenting what you need, your manager should actually understand
Right.
what their place in your development is and openly talk about that. To your point, I'd like to manage a team. This is what I bring to the table to do that.
Right.
Sure, I can do the individual contributor role, but this is a value I'm going to bring to you as a manager of a team. And I need to know what you're going to do to help me get that work done. Right.
No, that's good.
I don't know.
I think that helps a lot. And I think for me, the hard part was because it was so fast at PlayStation, I didn't have time to do all that. And the BP knew me. So it didn't matter. He knew me. So, it was
Yeah.
like he knew my work and my work. But then when you go into something like Thermo Fisher, where you're constantly like in a unicorn position. So now I've been very skeptical about some jobs where you're backfilling. I don't know if we ever talked about that, Liz, but as you're applying for jobs, I've been skeptical because I've been burned about jobs where you're backfilling and they've had this golden child they no longer have, and now you're the person stepping in, or the unicorn
Yeah. Are
position.
you the rebound candidate?
Exactly. Like I've had people say, "Well, you wouldn't be here if I didn't move out the role." Well, that's kind of rude. So let's not. Yeah, it was at that company you said you worked for, that
Kind
big
of
company.
rude. That's totally rude.
That company you said you worked for. Yeah, I had worked there for a little bit too. That one of those companies you had mentioned. Yeah. So that, and then just that unicorn role, I think, because when the person that develops a role that doesn't have um data behind it, it makes it hard for that role to still have some sticking power when they leave.
Well, I want
So
to do a little like directing clarity manifestation thing here. Not in a woo-woo sense, but I want to know whenever we bring a product to market, we create product market fit and we keep iterating on that product until we actually get the exact product market fit so that it can go. So, taking from that book, Never Search Alone, I want to do the candidate market fit with you. So, you as a product, are you identifying as I'm an event manager who can do anything that you need me to do? Or are you identifying as a senior level event marketing strategist who can lead a team and I'm looking for this kind of role? Which energy are you putting out right now?
the energy, I think, in my elevator pitch in which I put out is, hey, my name is Lice Johnson. I come up with 12 years of experience. I specialize in customer experiences. But based on what you're saying, I think when I say that, it's like I instead of growing people. And that's the thing, I need to change my language around that, number one.
And this, I mean, I've been in the same place. I think that you're probably coming at it with a whatever you need me to do, I can do it. I need a job. I want a job. I've got the background. You can trust me with anything. And I think you want to have like it's almost this is gonna sound weird, but like a female energy of like I can take it all on. And you need a little bit more of that male energy of this
Yeah.
is who I am, what I do, and what I'm gonna do for you, and more aggressive in the I am a director level person. I have well over 10 years of experience, including experience leading teams cross functionally, blah, 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 all the right words. And that is what I want to do. If the role that you're offering doesn't have me in a manager position right now, that's okay. What is my path to management when I take this job? And so you're putting that part out there a little bit more forcefully. That, yeah, of course, you're willing to take an IC role right now. It's fine. But you want to come in with them knowing that you're already there and that you're ready to take it on.
Thank you. That's great. Sorry to monopolize, but I'm like,
No, that's fun.
come.
So I think if you haven't read Never Search Alone, it's like the first part's a little like it makes you do all sorts of go backwards and ask people questions. You can skip that. But actually in the Slack channel, the job search Slack channel, it's got the like the Manukin 2-page template, I think is what it calls
Okay.
it. And like just filling that out, it helps you have an elevator pitch, but it might not be the elevator pitch for the job you actually want. And
Yeah.
so just
Okay.
getting that and kind of putting that on your bathroom mirror so that you see that every day, I think that might
Yeah.
be
It's a
helpful.
it's
That's
a
good. I'm
good
gonna go
point.
back to the Slack. I love that channel, by the way, on EG. I love that. So I will definitely look at that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I also think, Liz, to your point, your resume should tell the story of what you've done, right? Based on this role and what I'm gonna do is the real value that's important for people to, I think, get in their head. I want you to know that you can't live without me because this is what I'm gonna do for you.
Yeah. So what's yours, Heather? Right now, you're looking for another executive level position. How do you position that when you tell people?
I think it depends on where they are. I firmly believe that my next role will be because I've talked to someone that I know, right? I am a connector of humans, and I do feel that um, applying for leadership roles is not how I'm going to find my next job. So my conversations are very much this is about what I'm looking for. I'm looking to lead a global revenue or performance marketing organization. I think it needs to be minimum $500 million in ARR or revenue. Just size wise, I do like plumbing. I'm not a scrappy starter upper kind of gal. I know that about myself. Um, I do think I need to have the autonomy to build and lead a team that is focused on performance and engagement to drive revenue.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. It's very clear, crystal clear. So you know who you're talking to
Three,
get you that
three
job.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Three things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
But I also think it's a hard time, and lots of people are looking for jobs. So I think the thing for me is I'm looking for leaders I want to work for, people that I'm inspired by, and then we'll figure out the rest. And I super feel for the change so often happening right now, to have so many managers in so little time. Um, I think my point is going back to my documents, right? It doesn't matter who the person you're reporting to is. I'll change the name, right? On the document, change the access. And it's like, you're my new boss. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I need from you. Right? It
Yeah.
doesn't change when the human changes. The work is still good, but how are we going to talk about this? Because this is what I've been focused on.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I've found that, and maybe Liz, you can talk a little bit about this, but having worked other places since I worked at Dell, I think we all thought Dell was crazy. And now I look at Cisco and I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy. Dell wasn't crazy at all, right? They had their stuff together, right?
Well, you know.
And I mean, it's a refreshing conversation, but I feel like there's a lot of volatility in the market today, and I feel that something we had at Dell that I have not seen since that time is absolutely accountability. 100%. You said you were going to do this. This is what we said we wanted, right? And how did we do that together? And I find that my running docs, I just call them my one-on-one docs, like they are really eye-opening when you do have a leadership change, because everything's right there. These are the things I need your help with. They're at the top. These are the projects I'm working on, and here's the status, right? And here's some other shit that I may not talk about with you in my one-on-one, but you should know what is happening here. I uncovered this. This is how we're working on it. It's a document. I mean, I had a boss most recently who said, I haven't seen any updates. And I was like, when's the last time you accessed our document? Because they're all there. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. And I was like, this is the document I bring up every one-on-one. Like, don't forget, right? Don't falter on the conviction that we have here. But we committed that we were going to do this, and let's hold each other accountable, because I think accountability it's a blessing regardless of the direction you're taking it. You know, Nicole, you didn't meet the expectation we have here. What are we going to do to fix it? How can I help you? That's not a bad conversation to have. And I think people will shy away from doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah, I know that you had brought up the question of moving from managing staff vendors over to team. Did we cover that effectively, what you were looking to get?
Yeah, it's always an interesting comparison. I feel like we all come from different worlds of events, and mine is nonprofit and conferences. And so, like, kind of trying to imagine what those transitions look like for everybody. It feels like it's so vast, and some folks it's like, well, I was never looking for events. Some folks it's, well, I went and I'm finding my way up in events by uh, saying, like I manage vendors, and that's similar. I feel like I'm still wrestling with how I go from what I do without doing a big role change, but I feel like that's my shortcoming in, like, if you were to look at my resume, it's like I don't manage in-house staff. Um, but I feel like the conversation of knowing what you want and how you pitch that to people is maybe something I need to work on a little bit, both for my internal job and if I look elsewhere kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit processing out loud, but
No, that's good. So I think what you're saying is that you've got all the responsibility to execute the events that you're doing, conferences and things like that. You don't have the direct staff. And when you're managing vendors, it still doesn't feel like you're managing them. It feels like you're their client. So you are put in that management role. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm definitely, I think like there are some individuals within the vendor relationships where I am managing them or I'm managing people for a short time,
Hmm.
but not enough. And I don't think enough is understood when you're in a department of one of events with the other folks that you're talking to of what that actually looks like and how that does correlate. And that's my responsibility to like teach and share that. Um,
I'm wondering if you could
and
again shift your mindset a little bit on it and almost draw out your org chart with you as the CEO of this conference and your vendors putting them in the places that they need to be in for if it was your department and they were your employees, who are the people that you're interacting with most and how you kind of just build that out as the way you view them. You've got somebody that's probably doing some of the creative design marketing stuff. You've got the AV vendors. You've got maybe you're working with a third party housing source or whoever it is, right? And start to put them
yeah.
into swim lanes like they're your department. And then when you start to
Hmm.
talk about it as you get interviewed for other positions and say, I have managed these swim lanes and I've had direct responsibility for the execution of this. I'm ready to have this where I can get a team and have them under my
Hmm.
kind of HR portion because that's the next step in my career.
I like that. I have a follow-up question that I think I might kind of know the answer to of the other big hurdle in nonprofit events, as you can probably assume, is budget. And we are like, I get a lot of, we see this path for you. However, we have to get the revenue first.
Right.
And I currently only have the levers to pull operationally of on the expense side
Mhm.
rather than,
You're
I
the L,
don't,
not the P. Hmm.
yeah. And so,
Do you
how,
have anything to do with
yeah.
sponsorship sales or membership sales?
I don't sell. There are a group of gals that do the sales. However, we like build sponsorships together, and then I do the execution of a lot of it of it operationally.
Are there opportunities for additional non-dues revenue streams that could come in through events? I'm not saying you want to go commission based. I'm just trying to think, are there other
Hmm.
things where you could actually be attached to revenue in some way that could become
Sure.
a bonus structure for you if they're not willing to change your salary because they've
Yeah.
got a planned budget, but are there things where if you hit certain goals, you could be compensated? I don't know.
So maybe a clarifying, actually, shockingly, in a nonprofit, feel like at this current juncture, I'm being compensated fairly, but my like sanity balance is nil. And so like my dream would be that we expand our team. So I'd be training somebody in at maybe coordinator, even intern level, and growing them to understand how to take on large tasks because I feel like I've outsourced and vendor partnered as much as I can to try to create efficiencies.
Yeah.
Um,
I love it. I think that the business
yeah.
model of your nonprofit is probably the same business model problem that we're having with Club Ichi, which is we could definitely
Hmm.
use more help because we're at our limit. We cannot
Hmm.
hire more help until we get more money. We
Hmm.
cannot get more money until we can accomplish more things, but we cannot accomplish more things until we hire help. About that?
Right. I mean, these are all systems, and I get it. And how do you, where we're all looking for the magic sauce, but it's like, when do we know when to pause certain things that
Right.
maybe are revenue generating to create a new revenue generating thing, or how
Mm.
do we evolve certain things? And a lot of this is I am also not at the level at which those get pitched necessarily. Um, and when you're already tasked with more than your 40-hour a week job, how do you say, here's this creative thing I came up with in my free time and my time to decompress? Like that struggle is there as well. I sound like I'm whining.
No, not at all.
The balance is tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So Heather, I want to take us to big enterprise level when you get headcount. And let's see if we can kind of bring this down to when you're in the small one. Because when you go beg your leader for an additional headcount, what is the business case you have to prove in order to get that money?
I think um I think as marketers specifically, as the general category of marketers, we want to do everything. And when I we want to try new things, we want to do more of this, we rarely say we need to do less of something. Um, but I think that's that's the part I focus on in headcount justification conversations. I'm like, these are the three things that we're not going to do. And they tend to usually have something really good in there. At least one of the things is like, oh shit, what are we going to do if we don't do that thing? We always do that thing. Um, but I think illustrating and defining the value that we get out of the headcount or the additional budget or whatever it is I'm asking for is balanced with what we're not going to be able to do. Um, I do think I always try to put a number on asks, right? We can generate this much more pipeline if we do
Right.
this thing or if we expand, right? This is how much more we're going to generate versus how much it costs. And that I think is the number that always makes eyes sparkle. Like, ooh,
I think
that's
that's right. Our business coach has been telling us that for every new position you bring in, within 90 days, they should be paying for themselves. So figuring out what that business model thing looks like. And I may have mentioned before, I've got this book called Buy Back Your Time. That's the one that, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we've been listening to or reading a lot, which is like, what are the things that I can hand off to someone else so that I can go focus on more money generating activities. And so I'm wondering, Sarah, if there's the business case that you can start to build out of, if we bring this person on, this is what they cost. However, because we bring them on, we're able to go do these things. I'm specifically able to do these things that will bring in more top line to afford the growth.
I like that.
So, Heather, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's
Thank
already
you for
been an
having
hour,
me.
unbelievably, but this was so amazing.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate you guys so much and the work that you're doing with Ichi. It's awesome.
Thank
And I'm gonna
you.
give Sam a heads up that in case she hears like, who is Ichi? Like I'm gonna let her know. But
Yes.
highly recommend. Yeah.
Amazing. And Carice, I know you jumped in at the last minute. I did record this. I'll drop the recording into the Slack channel shortly. And thanks everyone for joining us. And if you think of questions for the next time we get back together, drop them in the Slack channel. Thanks, team. Have a great week.
Bye,
Bye.
y'all.